try that again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. There are some great seats right up here in front. The Kingmas beat you to it. But there are still 3 here. There are some cushy ones over here. So if there are folks who are coming in, you can help them up this way. Why don't we begin with prayer, shall we? Gracious God, as we begin a new year and a new journey, we ask you to lead, guide, and direct us as a congregation. Continue to give us wisdom, insight, and the sensitivity to discern your direction as well as to follow it. Be with us not only in this hour, but in worship, in our time of fellowship, and may this be a great day to be part of your church. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you very much. I mean, when you look around this room and see over 70 people here, that's terrific. That's terrific. So thank you for being here. My game plan is for us to do some sharing and some talking, first of all, about what's happening in the United Methodist Church. And then our annual conference, and then some things that we are doing here. The second major topic will be worship, and then an educational overview for adults of what we're going to be doing, particularly this fall. All right? So that's the game plan. Most of you know that we have been on a journey, particularly since February and the results of General Conference. There have been major reactions to General Conference. And in fact, our congregation, through the leadership, made a decision in May to withhold temporarily, that was our hope, temporarily to withhold ministry shares. Now, for many of you, you may not understand that phrase. Some of you will understand the word apportionment. But what in the United Methodist connectional system, every church has financial obligations. I don't want to make that overly dramatic, but we all participate in doing the work of the United Methodist Church. And part of that commitment that we make as a United Methodist congregation is to be in concert with other United Methodist churches to do the work of ministry. And that boils down to several areas. We have the local church, which is what we are most responsible for. We partner with other churches, and in our case, there are close to 900 United Methodist churches in the state of Michigan. And we are now called the Michigan area of the United Methodist Church. No. Conference. Michigan Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Thank you.
Says one who works for them. And then we also have the General Conference, and that is our worldwide body. It was at General Conference in February that there was considerable rancor as we got together about The issue primarily was full inclusion of all people, both in the life and ministry of the church, but particularly as it relates to clergy. So the decision was to continue. That's a little hot. The decision was to continue with the language of the current book of discipline. What that prompted was reactions, particularly in the United States. And so there have been lots of meetings happening. Meetings that are happening all over the world, really, in trying to figure out what to do and how to do. But in particular, there has been new insights and new understandings in the United States. And let me give you an example. What we have learned is that approximately 70% of United Methodists in the United States are willing to be open and affirming to people regardless of race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. What we have also learned is that nearly 70% of the financial backing of the United Methodist Church comes from the United States. What we have also found out, and this has been fairly recent, it's been within the last month, that the passage of the final legislative motion for disassociation was actually disqualified because of some improprieties of voting. They discovered that some folks had voted that were not credentialed to vote. And because of the slim margin of that disaffiliation, they felt that it was only fair to remove that from passage. We have also learned that in this discovery process throughout the United States, there was a new energy that was found and exerted, particularly among those who align themselves with more progressive theology, to be involved in helping annual conferences to elect delegates to next general conference that are more in keeping with that 70% of the United States population in the United Methodist Church. So in our case, for example, at our annual conference in June, a very, very well-intentioned organization of the Progressive Voice was organized. And I believe all of the 10 delegates that were elected, both clergy and lay, were elected through that effort to get the more progressive, more open folk representing our conference. What you need to know is that there is another general conference coming up in May of 2020. So we are talking about just a matter of months away. There are ways in which the church is trying trying desperately to figure this out without schism. I think that's a fair assessment, that they're trying everything they can do to avoid schism. However, it is looking like that may not be possible. We'll see. But there are many organizations within the United Methodist Church that are coming together and trying to shape legislation to go to General Conference that can, in some ways, be a representation of what was presented at last General Conference in the One Church plan. And there was also another plan that didn't get much traction at the last General Conference, but is now being considered at least a viable possibility, where we will organize the United Methodist Church into conferences based upon ideology and theological persuasion. So, all of that to say, it's way too early to know anything. And what we will try to do as best we can, just as we have done over the past several years, is to keep you as informed as we possibly can, and to bring you the information that is salient for you to make educated decisions for yourself. One of the things that happened at our annual conference was that our bishop decided that he really wanted to have a straw vote to see where the Michigan area churches and lay leaders and clergy might fall on this continuum. And so the phrasing was very wise. It was extremely wise. What he presented in the form of a motion was, if you were to vote, or if you had been a voter at General Conference, would you have voted for the one church plan, or keeping the discipline exclusive in its language as they elected to do? And after the vote was taken, I believe the vote was 68% to 32% in favor of being more of the one church plan and more affirming of all people. It was all of that that led, I'm not sure everybody's aware, but we had named a committee through the leadership council of the church. We had named a committee to help us sort through it, to watch, to listen, to do the research, to pay attention to what they were seeing. And it was their decision to bring the recommendation back in May to hold our apportionments until we had clearer understanding of the direction, particularly the Michigan area was going to go, but how things were going to work out in the United States. They have been very attentive, and in fact, I want Jill and David and the rest of the committee to stand, if you would, because you are the ones who have been the ones who've been watching this. So would you stand? You who have been, and I think Bill Ewing was here. I don't see him. But these folks, thank you. These folks have been the ones who have been paying the most attention. And they now have concluded, and they are bringing a recommendation to the Leadership Council tomorrow night to restart paying of the ministry shares and to catch up those, and you need to understand that we did not spend any of that money. The money that we would have spent on ministry shares was put in a sort of an escrow account and held, and if the Leadership Council determines that they're in agreement with the Way Forward Committee, then that will be paid probably by the end of the week. My iPad just went off. Let me pull it back. I think I've covered everything that's on my notes. Let me ask if you have questions. Jenny? Sure.
Yeah, I just want to add something, which doesn't contradict what you said in the past, and that is, I think.
Norm?
I'd just like to share something I read this morning, wee hours of the morning, as a matter of fact, that the Council of Bishops of the African continent had sent a proposal to, I don't know if it's a formal proposal or a resolution, that they would be against any move to dissolve the United Methodist Church. They will want to see the United Methodist Church continue. They want to see the agencies and boards continue nationwide and globally. And as I read that, it means that they might be much more amenable to, quote, lobbying by the centrist position rather than the traditionalist position. So that might be a direction that is worth looking at in the future.
All right. Anybody else? Questions for clarification or anything that you want to have clarified?
This isn't really clarification, but just one more resource for staying in touch and trying to get information. If you're on Facebook, there is a group called Michigan Uniting Methodists, and a lot of information gets shared there. The article that Norm was just talking about was posted there this morning by Paul Perez, and so it's a good resource if you're not already in touch with it.
All right. Can we move on? Good. Second topic is on worship. One of the things that we do at First Church extraordinarily well is worship, and our worship life is healthy and good. What we have been working at and paying attention to for a long time, and it's not even new with me. It's been something that we've been pondering and trying to figure out for a very long time. And that is the dynamic of two services on a Sunday morning. When I first came, there was an overlap. There had been a move to have the first service at the same time as Christian Education Hour. And what we learned from that was that the Christian Education Hour and the Christian education participation, particularly by the adults, took a big hit. It was a major hit. And so after some time, we moved to an 8:15 service. But the 8:15 service, because of the cavernous nature of our sanctuary, when you have less than 150 people in there, it feels empty. So what we did was that we moved worship for the early service into this space. And we've been in this space for a couple of years. What we were doing throughout that, and it was wonderful, and particularly the people who love the smaller, intimate feeling, they enjoyed that 8:15 service. But it had not only flatlined in terms of growth, it was actually declining. And so we were experiencing a decline in numbers while we were giving a lot of time and attention to pulling off both services. What we have been doing is wrestling with a second service that we believe we need, but what is the best alternative for it? And so Pastors Tim and Joan have been working diligently at that. And I'm going to ask one or both of you to come up here and share some of the things that you have learned and a direction that we are taking.
I can start. So we've been in communication with the church. Well, we're kind of looking around and saying what's kind of needed moving ahead into the future in worship, and how can we have a worship service that's not just kind of slapping on an alternative style of worship, but really kind of thinking through and imagining what things like diversity and inclusion look like in community with God and with one another and with our neighbors that we don't see here yet. So we found a church in New York City called Middle Collegiate Church that's doing that kind of worship really well, that's multiracial, multicultural, and celebrates all genders and orientations. And so we got in touch with them, and come to find out they are really interested in kind of like spreading that, what's happening really well there, to another church in the United States, and they were really interested to do that with us. So they've agreed to be in a 2-year contractual consulting relationship with us to help us build that kind of community. Do you want to say more about that? Okay.
So as Joan said, we're looking for what the community doesn't have already. And so we have a lot of very traditional churches, and of course Grand Rapids is well known for having a church steeple on every corner, which kind of says to me, when people can't get along, they just start a new church. So what we're doing is we're saying, what's missing, what's not already here, and we already have something that's right here. We have a wonderful spot, and we have dedicated leadership, and we really want to form not just what Joan and I are thinking, but what are other important voices that will companion with us on this journey to help bring about a reality that is multicultural, multiracial, and inclusive. And so we're really excited about getting started.
So, don't go. Because I want you to field any questions too. So let me kind of give you a synopsis. What they have been doing is doing the research, and they brought the idea to both the Leadership Council in May, We've talked about it among all the lay leaders. We have talked about it extensively in the staff. We took a proposal to the Legacy Committee, and just so that we all are understanding similar language, we have the blessing, and it really is a blessing to this congregation, that over the years we have accumulated what in many congregations would be called bequest funds. Okay? Ours is about $4.5 million. And so what happens is that there's a legacy committee that deals with requests for funding. And typically they are requests and responses to those requests that are time limited, usually within a 1-year period. But when this opportunity came along and the partnership and the consultation arrangement with a church in New York, and I believe they have agreed to do 2, and one is us and the other is in Dallas, Texas. And so in this consultation, it costs money to be in a consulting relationship. And the proposal was developed and presented to Legacy, and they have agreed to fund it. So we are in good order to be able to be in this consulting relationship with this church. That particular church and that particular pastor and staff are also developing a doctor of ministry focus on this kind of a multicultural, multiracial, and open worship experience at Drew University. So there are many, many things that are very exciting about it. The game plan right now is that there is a study group that has been invited to participate in reading the book at some point in the next few months. The consultants from New York will be here, and they will, oh, my battery's not going. They will be here once or twice. Jackie, the senior pastor there, will speak on Sunday morning and give some examples of how we are proceeding. What the current plan is to offer this service in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and before the 5 o'clock time, where we would have a meal, and then followed by some educational opportunities as well. So it would be 4 o'clock-ish into the 5 o'clock dinner, and then classes afterward. So it will not be in any way connected to the Sunday morning experience. We don't have to work in another thing on Sunday morning. So, with all of that, questions for either Tim or Joan or myself? Yes?
What's the name of the church?
It's called Middle Collegiate Church. If you Googled that, you would find it. Middle Collegiate. It's part of, in New York City, there is a collegiate church organization of Reformed churches in America. And one of the participants in that arrangement, I think there are 5 churches that are considered collegiate churches, but one of them is Marble Collegiate. It just went flying right out my head. Where Norman Mitt's appeal was for 52 years. Question, yes?
Just a
George.
comment. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Washington DC at Foundry United Methodist Church, and it's very ethnically diverse as well as gay and lesbians.
Okay. There was another hand over, yes.
Is this a United Methodist Church?
Pardon me?
Is that a United Methodist Church?
No, it is a Reformed Church in America congregation. Norm?
It wasn't mentioned specifically, but the inclusion also in handicapping situations or persons.
Yes. Anything else? That's it.
Our goal is also to make sure the leadership of this this service is also representative of the congregation that we're dreaming to form. So it will not always be, Joan and I preaching. We will certainly be changing up the preachers as well as making sure that the liturgy as well as the music reflect that multicultural, multiracial, and inclusive community we are hoping to form. So those components are right at the forefront. They're not add-ons later on if we get around to it, or in the second year we're there. It's starting right now, right in the very beginning. So that's part of the intentional way where this community will form.
All right? Yes?
When do you see this worship beginning to start?
Tentatively, we're looking at the first Sunday in January. Yes.
I have a question, and it might be just the way I'm understanding of the agreement. To me, it's coming across as if there will be, the morning worship will be totally separate from the evening service. What happens will there be to, you know what I'm trying to say, to connect the two, rather than it just being there's the morning and the evening, and we meet the same day.
So the question is how we're going to try to intentionally have this be part of the full community of First Church and not sort of its own separate thing apart from what happens really well at 10:45 in our adult education. And so one of the with La Nueva and has been creating that kind of community happening at 532. And so I think that we can, in a lot of ways, connect the congregations or the worshiping communities at that hour and offer those kinds of experiences and have other experiences and meals and things that connect us. And then also I think that once that worshiping service kind of finds its voice, that we hope that that what happens there in worship we can sort of share that too. So if you're in the choir, don't think I'm not speaking for Eric, but my hope is that maybe sometimes the choir that sings at 10:45 might sing at 4 once in a while, and that I'm gonna get in trouble. But that we can, and that if there's a gospel choir that develops at the 4 o'clock service, that choir can sing at the first, that we can sort of exchange and share together the strengths of each service.
I think that there's also, a well-formed leadership and committee structure, and so that we want to see those voices then begin to partner, such as the missions and community work that's already going on, that goes on really well here. That piece of justice will continue and have representation from both, just in terms of education too. So all those things would just have, we wouldn't be doing things, having 2 separate structures and 2 separate everythings, that we would be joining together on those things to create one voice that comes out of this church.
Randy?
Just a quick question. You may have said it, but the 8:15 is now no longer exists.
Correct. He was asking, so the 8:15 service is no longer offered? And I said, correct. At least for now. At least for now. We have some groundswell, or we have, 1,000 people on a Sunday morning, and we have to go to another service, then we'll deal with that at that time. David?
How much is the consulting fee per year?
Do you remember what the consulting fee is? I think for the 2 years, it's 20,000. And that includes travel from New York. Yeah. Sound exciting? Yes? I can't read your faces very well. Are you good? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tim and Joan. What I want to do now is to shift to an overview of adult education. One of the things, and I want to be transparent about this, one of the things that I believe is very important are classes for all ages, and to be involved as much as possible in the learning process of what it means to be a person of faith. We never get to an arrival place. It's always a process that keeps moving and growing, that is lifelong. What I personally discovered, and this has nothing to do with the fact that I am getting older. But what I discovered, particularly the last 18 months, is that it's really difficult for me personally to be on my A game at 8:15, teach a class, and then be on my A game at 10:45. It's tough to do those back to back. And when we were looking at scheduling and decision making, we felt as a staff, and I felt particularly, that my presence, and as well as Tim's and Joan's, in the educational process of the church was crucial, particularly right now. And so, please understand that we didn't enter into this time adjustment lightly. We did this with great intentionality so that we can indeed focus some intentionality around Christian education. So let me start by telling you what I'm going to be doing these next 10 weeks. The first 4 weeks, I'm going to be doing a membership exploration class. Patsy sent me a list of people who have been attending very regularly and have indicated that they want to join First Church in some regard. And the list was about 26 names. And we had a huge class, if you'll remember, last spring. So there is something exciting going on in the life of the church. And so I'm going to do the first 4 weeks in a membership exploration class. And parenthetically, anybody who wishes to sort of renew their vows, so to speak, and learn some things about the church maybe in this day that or questions that you can have addressed, you're welcome. Anybody's welcome. Okay? The second period of time, which it will begin October the 20th. I'm going to do a 6-week leadership development class. So we're going to be doing that this fall, between now and Thanksgiving. Those are the two things that I will be involved in. Jenny's going to come and she's going to share about a class she has. I think Joan is going to talk about her class. Tim, are you going to say anything about confirmation? Sure. Okay. Here we go. Jenny?
Thanks. Let me begin by talking about this class that's called Jesus is the Question, by asking you a question. How many questions do you think Jesus asked in the 4 Gospels, as recorded in the 4 Gospels? Just yell out a number.
40.
Lots. 40. Anybody else? 100. Hundreds. 306. Close. Jesus asked 306 questions. How many questions do you think he was asked? Thousands? Any other? 183. How many questions of the 183 do you think he directly answered? 3. By some counts, 8. Depends on how you define a direct answer. So, Martin Copenhaver was senior pastor at Wellesley United Church of Christ, and also he maybe still is president of Andover Seminary, which is a UCC seminary in Massachusetts. I love his articles, I love listening to him speak, and I really enjoyed reading this book. I did a sermon series on it at Georgetown a couple of years ago. It's just 4 weeks long, which means if you're going to join me in this conversation, you have homework to do. And the first homework assignment is the introduction and the first 3 chapters, so that we can begin right away on September 22nd. Hope to see you there.
Dom?
Leandro and I will be facilitating a 4-week class called Listening for Justice. We're going to use podcasts instead of books, so your homework will be listening to 1 podcast per week that we'll send you a link to. If that sort of language seems obscure to you or you're not sure, we'll talk about it, because we'll figure out ways to make that accessible. But for those of you that do listen to podcasts, you know that there's a lot of wisdom offered in those from voices that, when we start to listen, then can really help us to broaden our views about things. And so the topics will always be the intersections between our faith and then how we practice our faith, and then how we practice that in public, in justice, and in mission and outreach. And so we'll get to hear voices, and then the actual class will be some discussion questions relating to the podcast, and then some hopefully fruitful discussion about then what do those things mean as we think and apply them to what we're doing here at First Church. So there'll be some practical sort of steps to it too.
All right, thanks. Sharon?
Norm Collins and I are going to be co-leading a class for the parents of confirmation students. And that's going to begin September 22nd. And hopefully the class is designed to facilitate conversation among parents and discussion about what our kids are learning in their confirmation class and studies throughout the year.
And this this is a confirmation year here at First Church, so Emily Ubing and I are partnering to do the class together, and Emily's actually leading the class right now while I'm in here, so we're partnering to do this, and it'll culminate with you welcoming the confirmands on May the 31st, which is Pentecost Sunday. So we'll be working all year, and we have a rigorous, I don't want to call it a curriculum, but it's just really a lot of information and ways to help our confirmands answer the question that was asked to them or answered by their parents for them at their baptism that they will now answer for themselves. And what does it mean to be part of a church? And who is God? And what is all this about? So, and how do you find ways to lead from within to share your gifts with the church?
And how many students? Do you have any idea yet?
It keeps changing. I think we're at 10 or 12.
So about 10 or 12 in confirmation class, which is a good number. One other class that will be facilitated by my wife that will begin on October the 20th. There is a new book, it's a brand new book out called Stories Jesus Told, and it's subtitled How to Read a Parable. It's by an author named Greg Carey, but it focuses on parables and how we look at those stories and apply them. Okay? So that's a second, it will follow Jenny's class. Dick?
For the last couple of years, as you know, First United Methodist has been outsourcing ministry to the Clark Retirement Community, and I like to think of it as First Church's second campus. And we've been significant relationship and ministry there through First Church. My question is, regarding the several things that we've been talking about here, how does that relate to Clark Retirement Community, or does it?
How do you want it to? I don't think it does directly, Dick. I think we have lots of folks in this congregation who are residents at Clark, and they are full participants in the life of this congregation, making this their church home. So I think that is our obvious connection. I think one of the things that we attempt to do is that when we have a class that is applicable to have a class at the Clark campus, we're happy to do that. And so when that occurs, we'd be happy to do it.
There is a class called Advent.
Okay.
Starting around Thanksgiving.
Okay, and there is a class that will be offered at Clark during the Advent season. Okay. You don't know it, Dick, but you just gave a good segue to one of the things that I want to talk about briefly. There are several other things that are before us that we will be giving our time and attention to, both administratively and from a ministry standpoint. Is something that we do, and we do extraordinarily well. But we also need helpers. And one of the ways in which we can extend our congregational presence to Clark is actually through folks like you who would be perhaps willing to do visitation over there. That is something that Denise Neislonger organizes, and Denise is in the back, and you wave your hand, Denise, or come up here. But Denise orchestrates and does that kind of assignment. The Clark community is shifting, much like our culture is shifting. Things are looking very different. They've got a different kind of vision than they've had in the past, where they are doing some very subtle but significant shifting from being, like many retirement communities, from being just a place to go and, wait to die. But that's kind of the old image of a retirement community, where they are shifting into a more vital community, where there is exercise places, where there's walking, where there's significant involvement, and they're trying to develop a new resident program and residential place over at the Keller Lake campus that will be even more focused on independent living. We don't know, we know, let me give you what we do know. What we do know is that just like in the church, that little paradigm shift of focus will impact ministry. It just will. Because when you have folks who are shifting in their own understanding of what that retirement community is offering them, they may choose to stay very connected with the church that they already have and have been part of for a very long time. And so what we are doing is that we're trying to be attentive to the shifts in population in that community while being responsive during this time of transition. It's a very delicate balancing act, but one that we are watching and participating in very carefully. We are also, in the next year, going to be doing some very specific looking at space utilization of our First Place building. Some of you may realize, some of you may not, know that the office-looking building across the street is also part of our campus and what we own as a congregation. On the second floor, all of our church offices are there. On the fourth floor, that has been an organization called Samaritas, alias Lutheran Social Services. They rent from us that entire fourth floor. It is probable that they will be moving. They are building a new building, and it is probable that they will be leaving the fourth floor. So what that means is that we have an opportunity. Some would call that a problem. It's not necessarily a problem to me. It is an opportunity to recast a vision of what we are doing with our facilities to be in more significant ministry. Because it would be my hope and goal over the time that I am here to have that building to be a shift to being an outreach center of ministry, not just a place where we rent space. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be an income stream from those ministries. But what we've got to do is that we've got to transition into a new way of being over the next year. Because it's likely that Samaritas will be leaving by this time next year in 2020. All right, that's a lot of information. It's 10:15. Anybody have a question? Is that a question? Or
Yes.
Is that, okay, go ahead.
How's it coming with the renovation part of this building?
The building program, or the building possibility. Let me just tell you that with the anxiety that was in the United Methodist Church, we decided to put that at least on hold for now until we have greater clarity. There have been some efforts to think strategically about backing away and doing this one step at a time and focus first on handicapper accessibility as being primary. So we are still pondering that, and we'll have greater understanding in the next few months. Anything else? Well, thank you for your time. One of the things that I want to highlight is that in the narthex now there is a welcome center so that people who are new can stop and gather information and be greeted. So take a look. It looks lovely, and Sammy's responsible for that. And so thanks for your time and attention this morning, and blessings on you as we get ready to worship.